Grace and peace, beloved of God, Apostle Cheryl Richardson here. I pray that you've had a really good weekend and that this past week has been amazing and that this coming week that we're about to embark upon will be even more amazing. Praying for you. This has been an eventful year for many of us with lots of challenges and victories and some more challenges, and we've established new relationships in many cases and severed old ones out of necessity because they were toxic, and even that should be viewed as progress, right? Moving in the right direction. And so we're just grateful to the Lord for his faithfulness to us and for his loving kindness, for his tender mercies. And I certainly appreciate his long suffering with me for sure. But he wants us to succeed, and he wants us to fulfill our purpose and our destiny. The thing that he's designed us for and shaped us for is the thing that we are best equipped to accomplish, just naturally, because the things that we need to succeed in terms of our destiny are things that he has built into us. Amen. And so I am grateful to know that I have an actual purpose and that I'm not just here chilling, until he calls me home. So, as I've stated, please share. And you all know I'm not real good at remembering to say that. I'm getting better. And if someone wants to go ahead and try to capture a lot of the information that I'm going to share on today, that would be greatly appreciated. As I've said in previous broadcasts, if you have questions or comments, do chime in. You have an opinion, do chime in. Anything that you think may be beneficial or helpful or encouraging or uplifting for us as we look at the dynamics of domestic violence restraining orders, feel free. I probably won't be able to answer all of your questions while we are live. I'll do my best, but I promise, as I do every week, that I will go back in as soon as we're done and address any questions and comments. I certainly appreciate you joining us on today, and I appreciate you sharing and hosting a watch party on your own page, sharing to any groups or any individuals on Facebook or off that you feel may benefit from the information that we're sharing. Now, I want to issue a disclaimer. I am a clinician, a therapist by trade, a career mental health professional, and a military veteran. I am not an attorney. And so the information that we're going to talk about today, I'm sharing with you for informational purposes, okay? What I want you to do is to reach out to a domestic violence advocate in your area, or you can inbox me for more information. But I like to provide you with sources and resources that you can go to in your time when you're ready to seek help and support for your own personal situation, okay? That there are pros and cons to this. I become concerned when I hear advocates just advocate for one course of action without talking about the ramifications of embracing that choice or that decision, okay? And so for many of us, especially those of us who name the name of Christ, for those of us who, feel that we are religious people or spiritual people, there's a tendency sometimes, I think, to over-mystify things. And which really kind of absolves us of any responsibility for being decisive or executing our decisions. So, and it's very, very easy to begin to treat the Lord as though he's a genie and not God. And he's not a genie, and he's not in a lamp. And we don't rub the lamp and get our way because we rub the lamp or because we spin around 3 times and tell our neighbor God is able. That's not how this works. Okay? We have got to be actively involved in our own deliverance. Okay, so whatever it is that we need deliverance from, we've got to be prepared to participate in our own deliverance, okay, and stop being so deep and mystical that we're getting destroyed and we're getting caught up. One of the things that is really weighing on my heart, because I feel that many people have this question, and I really want to address it at some point in the near future, is if people are Christians and if they are believing God and they're going to church and they're active in their ministry, why are they getting killed at the hands of their abusers? And that's something that we really need to look at and we really need to talk about. And we need to not act like this is not the case, because it is often the case. You've heard me say in the past that domestic violence is an epidemic within the church, that the rate of domestic violence is greater within the church than outside of the church. And this should not be. But what makes this possible? What makes it possible? It's got to be our mindset. It's got to be the way that we approach it, or the way that we excuse ourselves from approaching it, okay? We know that sin and evil dwells in darkness. That's where it lives. It needs darkness to flourish. And so as long as we're refusing to look at these things, and as long as we're refusing to address these things, these issues are going to have a stranglehold on the church of God. And this is not something that he's okay with. He's not okay with it. And so for those of us who are advocates regarding whatever the scourge is that is affecting the church and that is affecting society as a whole, whether it is domestic violence, whether it is human trafficking, whether it is child sexual assault, whatever it is, whatever the scourge is, it flourishes because of darkness, and it flourishes because we are not being assertive enough in terms of addressing it, okay? We're going to get started talking about domestic violence restraining orders, because it is important. But it's important also to note that there are pros and cons. There are pros and cons. And for a victim, it's important that they feel empowered to make the decision that they believe is best for them in their own time. And we can best respect that if we understand the dynamics. Now, if someone would type this in for me, hey Rosalind, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. It's www.womenslaw.org. www.womenslaw.org. WOMENSLAW.org. Okay. And the reason that I want that typed in is because if you go to that site, you can select the state that you live in from the drop-down menu, and it will tell you about the restraining order laws in your particular state. Okay, it's important that you have a place that you can go so that you can get the specifics. What we're going to talk about is general information that tends to be true no matter what state you were in. And even if you're not a victim, it's important that you know what the laws are, so that you know what to say to your friends and your loved ones when they find themselves in this situation. Okay? We know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced or will experience severe domestic violence. Not just domestic violence, but severe domestic violence, physical violence, in their lifetime. Now, what is it that we need to know? That restraining order laws are state laws, and each state has its own set of laws, also called statutes, that address domestic violence, okay? And their statutes specify the criteria for getting an order of protection or restraining order in that state. Okay, so again, these laws are state specific. That's why that website is so important. They're state specific, and the criteria in one state for getting a restraining order may not be the same as in the state right next door. Okay, so it's important that you know, right? The Bible says we should be men in business. So we need to understand what laws affect us. So a restraining order is state specific. They may not be identical. States can be sitting right next to each other and they have completely different criteria for getting a restraining order, okay? You can't just go to court and say, hey, they looked at me cross-eyed, or they looked at me funny, and I want a restraining order. So there are criteria that have to be met, okay? And the laws are also called statutes, okay, in every state. Okay, it's a legal order issued by a state court which requires that one party stop harming another party. So a restraining order in your state may be called a protection order. It may be called an order of protection. It may be called an injunction, okay? But they are the same thing. So again, go to that website, www.womenslaw.org, so that you can know how it's referred to in your particular state. So the rules vary from state to state that require that allow you to get a restraining order in the event of domestic violence, okay? Now, there are 2 different types. There are civil restraining orders and there are criminal restraining orders. Why do we need to talk about this? So that you can know where you're protected and where you may be vulnerable, okay? What one allows you to do and what the other one does not allow you to do, okay? In DV situations, there may be both a civil and criminal order in place, okay, at the same time because of the violent act in one incident. So it depends on the dynamic of the incident. It depends on what happened in the incident, okay? It really does, all right? Now, you may not want to pursue both civil. You may want to pursue both civil and criminal actions for maximum protection. So civil protection addresses more damages than anything. In a civil case, okay? In a civil DV action, you are asking the court to protect you from the person abusing you. You're not asking for jail time for their offense. Let me say that again. In a civil action, you're asking for the court to protect you, to cause them to stop harming you. But you're not asking for jail time. You're not asking for prison time because of what they've done. Okay? So if it's a civil action, we're not talking about jail time at all. We're talking about the judge saying, you need to stop doing this, this, and this. And these are the circumstances under which you may or may not interact with this person. Okay? Now, in the case of civil law, you are the one that's bringing the case. If it's a civil case, you're bringing the case against the abuser, okay? Now, if the abuser violates the civil court order, so let's say you go to civil court and the judge issues an order, right? A restraining order. If the abuser violates that, now they can go to jail, but you're not going in asking for jail time in a civil case, okay? In a civil case, you're the one bringing the case against the abuser most of the time, okay? You have the right to withdraw or drop the case if you want to. Now, here's the rub. Oftentimes, a civil case will get dropped for many reasons. Because the abuser intimidates the victim. Because flying monkeys influence, right? People that the victim considered friends or that they had a meaningful relationship with, who are influenced by the abuser or connected to the abuser or can't imagine that the abuser would ever mistreat you. And they're convinced that it must be a misunderstanding or that you must have done something. You must have done something to cause this, okay? All flying monkeys. That's a whole nother discussion that we've done, okay? But we're going to revisit that because it's important. So the abuser may intimidate the victim. The victim may be influenced by people that they feel are their friends but are connected to the abuser. Okay, and let me digress for a moment. If they're connected to your abuser, you cannot trust anything that's coming out of their mouth because they have a vested interest in believing that the abuser is not guilty and that you must have had some role in all of the chaos. Okay, so you cannot rely on that. Don't do that. Don't do that, okay? Now, when you want to talk about a criminal case, in a criminal case, okay, the system handles all cases that involve violations of criminal law. For example, assault, harassment, murder, theft. And then under this system, the abuser is charged with a crime. So the difference between civil and criminal is that in a civil case, the victim is bringing the charge, okay? And under the criminal case, the system itself, the prosecutor, the state's attorney, whatever it's called in your area, they are bringing the charge. The state is saying a crime has been committed and we are bringing a charge, okay? So the abuser is charged with a crime in that case. Now, in a criminal case, the prosecutor, may be called the district attorney, may be called the state's attorney, is the one who has control over whether the case continues against the abuser. In these cases, if the state brings a criminal charge against the abuser, the victim may say, oh, but I don't want them to be charged. Oh, but I hurt him. I hurt her. I loved it. They didn't mean it. They broke my eye socket, but they didn't mean it. They apologized. They were dropped on their head at birth. Whatever the reason is, because often abusers will hoover the victim to avoid a criminal case being prosecuted. They will hoover a victim, okay, in order to convince them that a civil case should be dropped. And oftentimes it's effective, especially in a civil case, because the victim is the one that's bringing the charge in the first place, right? And by law, they have a right to change their mind. In the case of a criminal case, there are times increasingly where the victim may fall victim to hoovering by the abuser. And hoovering is a term that's used to describe really the manipulation, the lies, the manipulation. It's all designed, promising you everything that they refused to give you before, whatever they need to say and whatever they need to do to get you to either not show up at court, or to say that you want to drop the charges, or to say that you lied, or to say that you exaggerated, whatever it is, so that they can avoid a criminal case, okay? Now, increasingly what we're seeing is prosecutors aren't falling for this. The victim may say, well, I changed my mind and I don't want to go to court. And the victim may end up being subpoenaed to go to court to testify anyway, because a crime has been committed, especially if there are victims. If there are other ways that they can establish that this crime actually took place, medical records, eyewitnesses, whatever, okay, they may very well prosecute no matter how the victim feels. Now, in some cases, they may say, well, the victim's not willing to testify. We don't have a strong enough case without them, or we don't want to take them through that, and they may drop it. Okay, so I'm not on here saying to you, you absolutely must get a restraining order. There are things that you want to consider. And I will tell you this. If you don't make a police report, and if you don't attempt to get a restraining order, there's no real record that anything has happened. Okay? If you feel that you're not ready to leave an abusive situation for whatever reason, I'm not mad at you, for whatever reason, because it's all part of the process. The concern is that you live long enough to get out. And that when you do get out, you still have your right mind. Okay? That's the concern. That you not die, all right, just hang out in an abusive situation that is clearly unhealthy. So you want to consider the pros and cons. And for each and every individual is different. But if you don't try to get a restraining order, if you don't call the police and make a report, there's no record. So a week, 2 weeks, 2 minutes later, when it happens again, because it will, because it's a cycle, so it's going to happen, something's going to happen again, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to increase in acuity. It's going to be more serious than what happened the last time. When the police do respond, as far as they're concerned, this is the first time. It's not the 5th time. It's not the 6th time. And so the leverage that they can bring to bear on that situation is weakened. Their judgment concerning what they're observing when they come and have to make a call about what has happened in this home or what has happened in this situation. Who is the primary aggressor? We've talked about that in previous discussions, okay? They have to make a decision, and part of what's taken into consideration is, has this been reported in the past? Okay? Has this been reported in the past? You get a different response if this is the 10th time versus the 1st time. Okay? And so you really kind of handcuff the people who are set in place to help and support you when you don't assume responsibility for keeping yourself safe as well. Okay? Now, I'm not bashing victims. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm just telling you the truth, okay? We want you to live. We want you to live and understand that you have value, okay? We want you to live. It's best that people know. It's best that you document. It's best that you report. It's best that you tell. But we're going to talk about, because this is about the dynamics, right, of a restraining order. So we're going to talk about why it's important that you look at this thing in a balanced way. And it's a personal decision. It's something that you have to decide. But remember, if a crime has been committed, there's a real good chance you're not going to be able to influence what happens after that. Okay? And the abuser will have brought it on themselves. Okay? All right. So in a criminal case, it's the state or county who has filed the case against the abuser and not the victim, okay? And as I said, it is possible that the victim doesn't want to pursue it, and it's possible that the prosecutor or state attorney may acknowledge that, accept that, and it's possible that they may decide this is a serious enough case that we're going to be looking at a homicide if we don't do something about this. And they may very well not drop the case at all, Okay? All right. Now, I mentioned to you about hoovering because it's important. It usually consists of, and it's named after the vacuum cleaner. You know how the vacuum cleaner, that was supposed to be the best vacuum cleaner on the market, and it would just suck up all the dirt and it just suck everything out, right? That's what hoovering does, okay? In a hoovering instance, the abuser manipulates, sweet talks, threatens, coerces, whatever they have learned works best, with the end goal being, at the end of all of the candy and flowers and gold bracelets and the tennis bracelets and the let's go on vacation, at the end of all of that is, and we're not going to court, right? And you're going to drop the case, right? You're not going to pursue charges, right? Okay. Right? So there you go. So that's the whole point. The whole point is to avoid court. It's not about them loving you, caring about you. They would love not to go to jail. That's really what it's about. Okay? Now, what can you expect at the first court appearance? So let's say there's an incident, there's some physical aggression, the police are called, and the victim seeks a restraining order. Okay, now that's awesome, right? And that's admirable. But don't celebrate too soon, because there's several more steps that have to happen in order to make that meaningful. Okay? Now, so the victim decides, I'm getting a restraining order, and that's good because maybe this is the second or third or fourth or 50th time that they've been abused, and they have never reported it. So it is a huge step that they have involved law enforcement, and it is a huge step that they have requested a restraining order. There's a difference between calling the police, that's one step, and requesting a restraining order. That's a completely different step. You can continue to just call the police, call the police, call the police. The problem with that is the next time they come around, the police don't have any more leverage than they had the first time. The restraining order will provide you with guidelines under which this person can be in contact with you, how close they can be to you, how many hundreds of feet, how many miles, whatever, that they can't, contact you on social media, that they can't contact your children or whatever. So it sets boundaries in place. Okay. Now, domestic violence is thriving because there aren't any boundaries in the relationship. The boundaries have been all crashed, right? And they're not being respected. The boundaries you thought you had are being completely ignored. You're not enforcing them. They're not acknowledging them. So there aren't any boundaries. A restraining order will put some boundaries around the situation and make it clear when the abuser is violating you, okay? Makes it clear in ways that the law recognizes. So it's one thing for you to call up 911, then make up, then have another fight, then call 911, then they come back, okay? Then you make up, then you call 911 again. You're just going in a circle, and there's no leverage. There's no leverage. The police don't have any leverage. You can call and make a complaint. If they show up and the person's not there, or if they show up and they don't see any evidence of what you're talking about, they're leaving. What are they supposed to do? Okay? But if there is a restraining order in place, okay, then now they've got some leverage. And now they know that maybe you're serious about extricating yourself from this situation. So one step is calling the police. And that's huge because oftentimes victims won't. But the next thing that needs to happen, though, in order for you to continue to progress, is to apply for a restraining order. If you don't, then law enforcement is limited in terms of what they can do when they do come out, because there's no boundary set. There's no boundary set. Okay. So what can you expect at the first court appearance? The first appearance may be ex parte, right? And that means that you'll see the judge, but the defendant will not be there. So you'll be in court if it's ex parte, and the abuser won't be in court. All right. Usually the judge will review the petition that you have filed, ask any questions deemed important, and decide whether to issue the ex parte temporary order. So the judge may order a temporary order when you first go to court for your first court hearing, even if the defendant is not there, based on the evidence in the petition. What evidence? I'm glad you asked. Okay. Any medical records you have, any recordings you may have of them threatening you, voicemail messages, screenshots from text messages, anything that's going to substantiate your case witnesses. Who has heard him or her threaten you? Okay. Witness statements. Like I said, medical records. Anything that you have that's going to substantiate that this is actually happening. For those of you who are in an abusive situation and you're not quite ready to do anything about it, the very least you can do is document what is happening. You can document when and where, what was said, what happened. You can do that, even if you're not ready to act on it, okay? And then I would suggest that you make sure that someone besides you has a copy of it. Somebody else needs to have this. So you can email it to an account that you have that the abuser knows nothing about, and copy someone else so that someone else has access to this information, okay? It's very, very, very important. So again, not trying to rush you into a step that you're not ready to take, but I think it's important that you understand the ramifications of taking action versus not taking action every single step of the way, okay? All right, so the judge will review the petition and he'll look at the evidence that you have provided, which is why it's important that you have been documenting what has occurred, what was said, what was done, were you injured, take pictures. It's easier now than it was years ago. I mean, you got a camera in your phone. A click of a button, you can send it to yourself, send it to an email account, and send it to someone else so that someone has it besides you in the event the abuser destroys your phone. Because at some point, they go for your devices, okay? All right. So the judge will review it. He'll make a determination about issuing a temporary order at that time or setting it for hearing, which means that you have to come back to court at another day, okay? What can be ordered? The abuser can be ordered to stop harassing, threatening, stalking, or abusing the victim. They can be ordered to relinquish all firearms. Now, not all states require this. I don't know why they don't, okay? Does that mean that they can't get another one? No, it doesn't, but they'd have to work at getting one, okay? They'd have to break some other laws to get one, okay? They can be ordered to stay away from the shared residence, but continue to pay mortgage, etc., okay? They can be ordered to stay away from the victim and children. In some states, the abuser can be ordered out of the home, even if they are the owner or leaseholder, if the victim has lived there a certain amount of time. So again, go back to www.womenslaw.org and check the drop-down menu for your specific state or the state that your loved one resides in so that you can know what the rules are, what the statutes say for your particular state, okay? The judge can order that the victim get possession of the family car, pets, and other possessions. The judge can force the abuser to give you certain documents like immigration papers, children's birth certificates, the things that you need to get reestablished elsewhere. The judge can forbid the abuser from posting messages or photos of you on social media, reaching out, contacting you on any social media platform. And of course, if they violate that, that's easy. Screenshot it and save it. That's a violation, okay? Most states allow the judge to order temporary custody and child support. They can order that the abuser or the alleged abuser pay for damaged property, medical expenses, etc. Okay? Now, it may not be the easiest decision for a victim to make, depending on the circumstances. So I want to look at real quick some of the circumstances that might make it difficult for a victim to actually pursue a restraining order. Again, it's important that we're educated concerning the pros and cons and stop over mystifying everything and stop sprinkling fairy dust everywhere, because this is how people are getting killed. Okay? I'm not sure what we're expecting God to do when we won't avail ourselves of information and education. In Hosea, it declares that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And as you hear me say almost every single week, that's not a period there. There's a semicolon. So the thought is not complete when we stop there. I've heard entire messages, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That is not all he said. He said it's because we have rejected knowledge. So it's not when we don't know that we find ourselves in the throes of destruction. It's when we have an opportunity to know, right? And we don't avail ourselves of it. Or we have an opportunity to know. The information is relayed to us, and we choose not to employ it. We choose not to execute it. We choose not to apply it, okay? that's when we get destroyed. We don't get destroyed any other way, people. We do not get destroyed any other way. God loves us, all right? But we have to be involved in our own deliverance. We have to hold ourselves accountable for getting ourselves free, okay? To avail ourselves of the help that God has placed around us. This instance, domestic violence, 20, 30 years ago, there was hardly any help out there. You could call the police and they tell the abuser to go take a walk looking at your black eye. Just go cool down. Go have a drink. To walk around the block and then come back. That was it. That was the extent of the help. And forget a restraining order. Forget a restraining order. That certainly wasn't going to happen. Okay? So today there is so much more help available. There are people dying, men and women, and it's senseless because the help is out there. The help is out there, okay? But you can't sit in it and refuse to engage. You've got to reach out for help. There are many, many organizations out there, okay? I'm an advocate, stand-up survivor. It might make it difficult for a victim to seek a restraining order. What are the things that need to be considered? Okay, immigration status. So if your immigration status, if your status here in the U.S. hinges upon you being in relationship with a U.S. citizen, that could be a problem. Because if that's the case and that relationship is fractured, now you don't have a right to be in the country anymore, right? The other thing that may happen is maybe you're not legal. Maybe you are an illegal alien for whatever reason. This applies to men and women. If you go to court, that's going to become known, and now you risk deportation to a set of circumstances that you may consider worse than what you're going through now. So these are all things that have to be considered, okay? And this is why it's a personal decision. But it's important that you know what the consequences are that are connected no matter what we decide, all right? The abuser may also file an order of protection to retaliate. And I've seen this countless times. Well, he punched me in the face, and so I'm filing an order of protection. And then the abuser decides, well, she bit me or she pushed me, and so I'm filing one too. So then you get into all those shenanigans, right? So now you're getting accused of stuff that you didn't do, or you're getting accused of things that you did using resistive or reactive violence. That's something else that we've talked about in previous discussions in response to being abused in an attempt to get the abuse to stop, okay? So they may file an order of protection against you as well, all right? There's the increased risk of violence due to the impending separation or the breakdown of the relationship, okay? And it's important that you understand that a restraining order should not be the only safety mechanism that you have in place. I don't want you to get a false sense of security because you have a restraining order, okay? If you were dealing with a reasonable human being, you wouldn't need a restraining order. You could simply say, leave me alone, and they would listen. So, it's important that you understand that you're probably not dealing with a reasonable person, okay? There are some who have enough respect for the court and are serious about their own freedom enough that they're not going to do anything that's going to take them to jail. That's a boundary that they will respect. They might not like it, but they're not trying to go to jail. Okay? They're not trying to go to jail. That's going to cost them more than they're willing to pay. Okay? And so they may respect it. But then you have those who will be enraged by a restraining order. They will be enraged by a restraining order. Okay? This is the height of them not having control over the victim. This is the height of other people intervening in their business. And this could really just make things worse. And so it's imperative that you have a safety plan. Do not get a restraining order and think that's all you need to do. You've got to have a safety plan. You need a safety plan. And I try to say this every week. If you say, I'm in love with this person and I think that we can make it, you still need a safety plan. You need a safety plan to stay and live. Okay, you need a safety plan. If you're planning to leave in the next 10 minutes, you need a safety plan that's going to cover your exiting that residence. Okay? And what happens when you leave there. If you're already out, you need a safety plan. All right? You need a safety plan. That 30 to 90 days after that separation kicks in, you are at high risk of becoming a domestic violence homicide statistic. Okay, at the very least, you may suffer greater violence. Okay, because of the complete lack of control that the abuser is experiencing at that time. Okay, so you need a safety plan. If it's been 5, 6, 10 years, you need a safety plan. Why? Why do you say that? Well, you know that was 5 years ago. Haven't heard anything from him or her. But what's going on in their life? What happens the next time they get rejected? There have been instances where abusers have gone on and established relationships with new people. That relationship fractured. They put them out. They went to court. And that joker circled back around and killed the last person he was with. Because he never got over the rage from losing control in that first relationship, okay? So it's not about what's going on in the victim's life. It's about what's going on in the abuser's life.